when you read the literature out there, there's talk of two competing leadership styles. One is referred to as transactional leadership, and the other is referred to as transformational leadership. Transactional leadership is defined as a process-focused leadership style that uses rewards, tangible rewards, for loyalty and good work. In other words, there's a transaction involved. You do things correctly, you achieve certain outcomes, you achieve these goals, and in exchange, you will get a bonus, time off, recognition, whatever, right? It's a quid pro quo. Contrast that with transformational leadership. Transformational leadership is a leadership style that's defined by using higher order instincts. In other words, we're trying to engage people to think about the big picture beyond themselves, how their action affects others, and how we want to raise consciousness with transformational leadership. We want to transform people into this kinder, gentler individual that, is giving to others. Now, I don't say that in a derogatory way, but the reality is truly locked on leaders understand how to do both. They understand that there is a need for both transactional and transformational leadership. That when people are engaged for others, we don't want to let people down. At the same time, we're also selfish. There's a duality to us as human beings. We both want to be selfless and selfish. And while it sounds competing, it actually isn't. We can be both at once, and most of us are in one form or another. And if we don't appeal to both aspects of people, if we don't give them a reason outside themselves so they feel satisfied, because that's where satisfaction comes from, as well as a reward so they don't feel taken advantage of, we're going to fail as leaders. So a truly locked-on leader knows how to use both styles and when to use them both. If you use just one or the other, you're cutting out half of your arsenal. I mean, it brings in mind to me the days when I was flying for the Navy. We had actually 3 separate weapons on our aircraft. We had what was known as the AIM-9 heater, was a heat-seeking missile. So it had a seeker head in its nose that could see the heat signature from the exhaust of the enemy aircraft. And once it acquired it while it was on our wing, we would then launch the missile and we could turn away. It didn't need us. It would go after the target. And I think of that sort of like a transformational approach. Once somebody's so inspired that they feel so good about whatever they're giving to others, and there are certainly people who are this way, that they'll do whatever it takes. You just point them in the right direction and off they go. And they don't need a lot of reward, if any. Then we had the AIM-7 Sparrow, which was an active guided, radar guided missile. Active meaning we had to paint the target with our radar system on our aircraft. Its seeker head was a radar seeker head, radar receiver. It would see the return, the reflection of that radar energy, know where the enemy aircraft was, and we'd launch it off our rail. And then we had to keep our nose pointed in that direction until intercept. In other words, we had to reward the proper behavior of flying towards the enemy aircraft by feeding it radar energy. That's the transaction. I give you radar energy, you go after the aircraft. So that's what transactional leadership looks like. Then we had the AIM-54 Phoenix. Now, the AIM-54 actually was a combination. It had both passive and active modes. Typically, at range, when you launch it, you are in passive mode. It was seeing the radar return and knew what direction you wanted it to go. But as it continued on the path, its own radar transmitter would eventually get within range, light up the enemy aircraft, and then would see its own return, at which point we could turn away and it would continue on its own. And that's what locked-on leaders do, is they create that AIM-54 Phoenix approach in their teammates, in their team members. To do this, we have to understand the accountability triangle and Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how these two work together. See, Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about our basic, most instinctive needs, needs we've had since man first walked upright. And the very, very beginning needs of these, the very first need is our need for food and water, what he called our physiological needs. And once we meet those, it's safety and security. As business leaders, we have to meet those needs first, right? Because they don't know us and they don't trust us. So we meet their physiological needs when we hire people. I give you, you come work for me, and here's how much money I'm going to give you every week or every hour, however we do that. And then we have to train them. Right? So the training falls under our accountability triangle. The training is part of what I call the mechanics. Accountability triangle, to remind you, is mechanics, mindset, and model. So mechanics are the safety and security piece of Maslow's hierarchy. We're showing people how to be successful in their job. And once again, that quid pro quo, that transaction comes in. I teach you how to be successful in the job. In exchange, you're going to do your job correctly. That's the way I showed you to do it. Once we've done that, however, we have to maintain that, because entropy kicks in. What happens is people tend to get sloppy, and unless we're constantly monitoring them, they start slipping in their work, and then work goes downhill. And then, of course, the transactional leader would do at that point is start taking rewards away as a sort of negative punishment until they correct their behavior. But now we slip into transformational mode. Now we go to mindset in the accountability triangles, right? Mechanics, mindset, model. Now we're in mind. So now we're part of love and belonging and the esteem part of Maslow's hierarchy. Because what we want to do is make sure they understand how their actions affect others. How by not following the processes and procedures, it's not just them shortchanging themselves, but the quality of the product or the service isn't going to be the same, or somebody else is going to have to pick up the slack, or the customer is not going to get what they were promised, or, right? There's a lot of different things that can come into that. So now we're hitting that transformational state where we're starting to get people to understand that their actions affect a much bigger picture than that. We also want to continue rewarding them by recognizing, by showing them we hold them in esteem, by recognizing when they do things right. So now we're doing both, right? We're in that locked on stage where we're giving them the big picture and that mindset, and then we're rewarding them by singling out their actions that are positive and good. Now, when we're doing all of that, we're actually modeling, which is the third M, the third trait of a leader. We're actually walking the talk. We're modeling the behaviors. We're thinking about them. We're setting them up for success by training them. We're acknowledging their success when we reward them. That's the transaction. That's transactional part. And we're reinforcing through that transaction that their mindset of the big picture of thinking others is something we want to see more of, and that's transformational. So we're actually doing it both, all in one. And the beauty is when we do this, what we actually end up doing is opening the door to what's called self-actualization, which is the top of Maslow's pyramid. Self-actualization is when people start doing what they want to do because they're called to do it. So now we're in that terminal guidance stage at AIM 54. We're at that point where now their own seeker head is putting out its own energy and seeing its own return and getting its own reward. It becomes self-fulfilling. So when we demonstrate those traits, we set people up for success by putting the right mechanics in place. We show them the right mindset and talk to them about the mindset and provide to them the mindset of how their actions affect others. And then we model that for them by doing our jobs the way we're supposed to do our jobs, not letting things slip through the cracks ourselves. Hold ourselves to this higher standard than we hold them to. Let them aspire to our standards. That's truly transformational. Do those three things, and I guarantee your workforce will come and work at a whole new level. For more leadership insights like these, subscribe to this channel. And don't forget to like this video to help other military-minded leaders. Ready to take your leadership higher? Join the Radical Accountability Movement. Get my Locked On Radical Accountability Tactics Guide and White Paper at lockedonleadership.com. Scroll to the bottom of the page.